Commander Eliza Quinn stared at the holographic projection, her coffee going cold in her hands. The signal had been transmitting for 2 million years, originating from a galaxy that, by all accounts, no longer existed. "So you're telling me," she said, rubbing her temples, "that we just received a message from the cosmic equivalent of a ghost?" Professor Rowan Thorne nodded enthusiastically, his spectacles sliding down his nose as he manipulated the floating symbols. "Not just any ghost, Commander. A chatty one. The signal contains approximately 3 exabytes of information. It's the most comprehensive extragalactic transmission ever recorded." "And I assume," Quinn replied, "that it says more than we've been trying to reach you about your starship's extended warranty?" Thorne snorted. "Much more. We've only translated a fraction, but the recurring phrase appears to be never stop humans from protecting the weak." Quinn raised an eyebrow. "That's oddly specific. Especially considering we didn't even exist when they sent this." "That's the fascinating part," Thorne said, pulling up another display. "The message identifies Earth specifically, despite being sent long before humanity evolved. It's as if they knew we would eventually exist." The Interstellar Communication Center buzzed with activity. Scientists and analysts moved between workstations, frantically working to interpret more of the mysterious transmission. The center, originally built to detect signals from nearby star systems, had never encountered anything of this magnitude. The massive data stream from the distant, dead galaxy had overwhelmed their systems for 3 days before they could even begin processing it. "Could it be a translation error?" Quinn asked. "Possible, but unlikely," Thorne replied. "We've run it through 17 different linguistic algorithms. They all produce essentially the same result. The message is directed at humanity, encouraging us to protect weaker species." Admiral Patel, who had been silently observing from the corner, finally spoke. "Or it could be a warning. Never stop humans from protecting the weak could be cautioning other species about us." "Either way," Quinn said, "it's unsettling that a civilization from another galaxy knew about us before we existed." "Perhaps they had predictive technology," Thorne suggested. "Or perhaps they were simply making an educated guess about evolutionary patterns." Admiral Patel crossed her arms. "Or perhaps they knew something about humanity that we don't yet understand ourselves." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Well," Quinn finally said, "let's not keep the ghosts waiting. Professor, I want you to assemble a specialized team to focus solely on this translation. If a dead galaxy went to this much trouble to send us a message, the least we can do is figure out what they were trying to say." Thorne nodded, already composing a list of experts in his mind. "Oh, and Rowan," Quinn added, "let's keep this quiet for now. The last thing we need is mass panic about alien prophecies." 2 days later, that plan went spectacularly out the window when Dr. Meera Patel, a junior analyst with more enthusiasm than discretion, posted about the discovery on her personal blog. Within hours, the story had spread across Earth and its colonies like wildfire. News outlets ran headlines ranging from "Ancient aliens endorsed humanity's guardianship of the galaxy" to "Extragalactic warning, humans are the danger." "Well," Quinn said, watching the media frenzy from her office, "so much for keeping things quiet." "Look on the bright side," Thorne replied, munching on a protein bar. "At least now we'll have plenty of funding. Ambassador Valerian, your species is becoming a problem." Ambassador Nix Valerian maintained her diplomatic smile, though internally she was running through a mental list of creative expletives. The trell'xian dignitary before her, Ambassador Drell, possessed 3 eye stalks that were all currently focused on her with undisguised suspicion. "I wasn't aware that protecting refugee colonies was considered problematic, Ambassador Drell," she replied smoothly. "It is when it interferes with established territorial agreements," Drell responded, his bioluminescent spots flashing with agitation. "This recent discovery, this message from a dead galaxy, has only emboldened your people's already troublesome hero complex." The Galactic Summit on Proxima Station had been tense even before the news broke. Now, with delegates from 87 species all buzzing about the mysterious message, humans had become the uncomfortable center of attention. "Perhaps," offered K.L. Thar, the avian representative from the Denebian Alliance. We should discuss implementing restrictions on human expansion until we better understand this message's implications. Nyx resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Typical. One ancient, cryptic message and suddenly everyone wanted to put humanity in a corner. With all due respect, she said, keeping her tone measured, restricting an entire species based on a partially translated message from an extinct civilization seems premature. Humans, rumbled Zorax, the massive representative of the silicon-based lithoids, are the only species we've encountered who regularly sacrifice their own interests for abstract concepts like justice. It makes you unpredictable and dangerous. I thought it made us charming, Nyx replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Later, in the relative privacy of the Earth Embassy's secure room, Nyx vented to her assistant, Theo. "Do you know what the real problem is?" she asked, kicking off her formal shoes. "They're not actually afraid of the message. They're afraid of what humans might do with it." Theo nodded, updating her briefing notes. "Humans do have a reputation." "A reputation for what? Helping species in need? Standing up to bullies?" "Oh no, how terrible," Nyx said sarcastically. "For emotional decision-making," Theo clarified. "The galactic consensus operates on logic and calculated self-interest. We operate on, well, Star Trek reruns and a stubborn belief that we should do the right thing even when it's inconvenient." Nyx sighed, pouring herself a drink. "The trell'xians have been systematically exploiting the resources of 3 developing worlds while claiming to be guiding their evolution. The Denebian Alliance has a slave class they insist are biologically designed for servitude. And everyone just accepts it because it's logical within their cultural contexts. And then humans show up," Theo added, "running around the galaxy like space Robin Hoods." "Exactly," Nyx said, taking a deep drink. "And now there's an ancient message that seems to validate exactly what we've been doing. No wonder they're nervous." Her comm unit chimed. It was a message from Earth Command. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session to discuss the human question. "Perfect," Nyx muttered. "Just what we needed." As she prepared for the session, news reports flooded in from across human space. The message had struck a chord with humanity. Protests were erupting on colonies where alien corporations had established exploitative operations. Human ships were diverting to help struggling settlements, regardless of species. The message had become a rallying cry. "You know," Theo observed, watching the feeds, "for a species that claims to value logic, our alien friends really failed to predict the obvious outcome of telling humans they shouldn't protect others." "Nothing motivates humans more than being told what they can't do," Nyx agreed, straightening her uniform. "Especially when it involves helping someone." When she entered the council chamber, 87 pairs of alien eyes turned to her. Some hostile, some curious, some calculating. "Ambassador Valerian," the council speaker intoned, "we need to discuss humanity's response to this message." Nyx squared her shoulders. This was going to be a long day. Professor Rowan Thorne hadn't slept in 36 hours, which wasn't particularly unusual for him. What was unusual was the blue-skinned, 4-armed linguist currently floating upside down in his office while singing what sounded like alien opera. "Zeph'ra," Thorne said, massaging his temples, "while I appreciate your species' unique approach to cognitive stimulation, could you possibly stimulate a bit more quietly?" Zeph'ra, the foremost xenolinguist from the aquatic Naiadi species, flipped right side up with elegant efficiency. "Apologies, Professor. My neural pathways activate most efficiently during harmonic resonance exercises." "Yes, well, my neural pathways are currently begging for coffee and silence," Thorne replied. They had been working non-stop on the translation, delving deeper into the complex language patterns of the extinct civilization. Zeph'ra had arrived 3 days ago, offering assistance after hearing about the discovery. As one of the few beings who had studied ancient cross-galactic communication methods, her expertise was invaluable. "Professor," Zeph'ra said suddenly, her eyes widening, "I believe we've been interpreting the syntactic markers incorrectly." Thorne looked up from his tablet. "How so?" The glyphs we identified as directional indicators aren't spatial, they're emphatic. Her webbed fingers flew across the holographic interface. It changes the entire meaning of the core phrase. Thorne watched as the translation algorithm recalibrated. The words shifted, rearranged, and then displayed a new message. Never stop the humans from protecting the weak. Oh, Thorne said quietly. That's quite different, isn't it? Indeed, Zeph'ra replied. The original translation suggested a mission statement for humanity. This reads as a warning to others about humanity. Thorne leaned back, running a hand through his disheveled hair. We need to inform Commander Quinn immediately. Meanwhile, on the other side of the research facility, Commander Eliza Quinn was deep in the historical archives, piecing together what little information existed about the extinct galaxy. The data was sparse, mostly long-range observations and spectral analyses conducted over centuries. Computer, display all available information on extinction events in Galaxy XJ2397, she commanded. The system hummed briefly before projecting a timeline. Galaxy XJ2397 experienced rapid stellar decay approximately 1.8 million years ago. Over 87% of its star systems went dark within a span of 20,000 years, suggesting artificial causation. Artificial causation? Quinn repeated. You mean someone deliberately extinguished an entire galaxy? Available evidence suggests systematic stellar engineering that resulted in premature stellar collapse. The pattern indicates deliberate action rather than natural phenomena. Quinn stared at the projection, a chill running down her spine. Who would have the technology or the motivation to destroy an entire galaxy? Insufficient data for conclusion, the computer replied unhelpfully. Quinn was still contemplating this when Thorne burst into the room, Zeph'ra floating serenely behind him. Eliza, he said breathlessly, we've got it wrong. The message isn't never stop humans from protecting the weak. It's never stop the humans from protecting the weak. The emphasis changes everything. Quinn's eyes widened. It's not advice to us. It's a warning about us. Precisely, Zeph'ra confirmed. The civilization that sent this message was apparently concerned about human intervention in some matter involving vulnerable parties. But why would they care? Quinn asked. They existed millions of years before humans evolved. Thorne and Zeph'ra exchanged glances. That, Thorne said, is the multi-trillion credit question. Quinn turned back to the extinction data. I think I might have part of the answer. This galaxy didn't die naturally. Someone killed it. She explained what she'd discovered about the systematic destruction of star systems. A civilization capable of extinguishing stars, Zeph'ra mused. That suggests a level 5 technological advancement, at minimum. If they had that level of technology, Quinn continued, who's to say they couldn't also possess predictive capabilities? Maybe they saw humanity coming. Or Thorne suggested, maybe they saw something like humanity before. The three of them stood in silence, contemplating the implications. We need to get this information to Ambassador Valerian, Quinn finally said. The political situation is already tense. This could change everything. Captain Miranda Hayes of the humanitarian vessel Hope's Horizon was having what she professionally referred to as a day. Let me get this straight, she said to her communications officer. Earth Command is ordering us to abandon our relief mission to Outpost Epsilon because some diplomatic types are having a hissy fit over an ancient message. Lieutenant Octavia Lee nodded. That's the gist of it, Captain. The translation update has caused quite a stir. Some species are interpreting it as confirmation that humans are dangerous meddlers who should be contained. Hayes snorted. And our response is to stop helping people? That's certainly going to prove them wrong. The Hope's Horizon was 3 days away from Outpost Epsilon, a struggling colony on the edge of trell'xian space. The outpost had sent out distress signals describing a mysterious illness affecting the colonists. As the nearest humanitarian vessel, the Hope's Horizon had diverted to assist. What are the trell'xians doing about the situation? Hayes asked. Sure. According to their official statement, they're monitoring the situation with appropriate concern, Lee replied. So nothing, Hayes translated. They're doing nothing while people die. She paced the bridge, considering her options. Directly defying orders would end her career. Following them would end lives. Captain, her first officer, Commander Dax, suggested quietly, there's nothing preventing us from experiencing a temporary communications malfunction. Hayes stopped pacing. Are you suggesting we pretend we never received the order? I'm suggesting, Dax replied with practiced innocence, that deep space communications can be unreliable. By the time we regain contact, we might already be providing aid. Hayes smiled slowly. Lieutenant Lee, it appears we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our comm system. How unfortunate. I suppose we'll have to continue on our present course until we can re-establish contact. Very unfortunate indeed, Captain, Lee replied, suppressing a grin as she deliberately disabled several key communication protocols. 3 days later, the Hope's Horizon arrived at Outpost Epsilon. What they found was worse than expected. The colony, home to a mix of species including humans, Archurians, and Betelgeusian refugees, was in the grip of an engineered pathogen that specifically targeted non-trell'xian physiologies. This isn't natural, the ship's medical officer, Dr. Finch, reported after analyzing samples. This virus has been designed to clear this planet of its current inhabitants. Designed by whom? Hayes asked, though she already suspected the answer. I can't prove it, Finch replied carefully, but the viral structure contains markers consistent with trell'xian bioengineering techniques. Hayes felt cold anger rising. So the trell'xians engineer a virus, unleash it on a mixed species colony, then monitor the situation with appropriate concern while everyone dies. And we're supposed to just fly away because they complained to the Galactic Council? Orders are orders, Captain, Dax said, not sounding particularly convinced by his own words. True, Hayes agreed. And my orders as captain of a humanitarian vessel are to provide aid to those in need. She turned to her medical officer. Dr. Finch, how quickly can you synthesize a treatment? With the ship's resources? 12 hours for the first batch, then we can mass produce. Make it happen, Hayes said, then turned to her communications officer. Lieutenant Lee, record everything. I want documented evidence of what's happening here. What are you planning, Captain? Dax asked. Hayes smiled grimly. I'm planning to give Ambassador Valerian some ammunition for her diplomatic battles. If the galaxy wants to paint humans as interfering protectors of the weak, then by the stars we're going to give them exactly what they're afraid of. News of the Hope's Horizon's discovery spread quickly once their communications malfunction was resolved. The evidence of trell'xian biological warfare against a mixed colony caused outrage across human space and beyond. Other humanitarian missions, inspired by Captain Hayes' decision, began ignoring diplomatic pressure to stand down. Across the galaxy, humans and their allies began uncovering similar situations. A Denebian mining operation using sentient beings as disposable labor. A lithoid colony crushing a native species under literal tons of silicon expansion, and more. In each case, human ships arrived, documented the abuses, and offered protection to the victims. So much for containing humanity, Ambassador Valerian murmured as she watched the reports flood in. The corrected translation hadn't deterred humans at all, it had galvanized them. The Galactic Council chamber had never felt more tense. Ambassador Nix Valerian sat at the human delegation's table, outwardly composed while inwardly calculating how quickly she could reach the exit if things went sideways. High Counselor Vex Tool, the ancient and imposing representative of the Archon Collective, glared down at her from the elevated central platform. His species' natural ability to inspire fear, a combination of pheromones and subtle psychic projection, was cranked up to full blast. Ambassador Valerian, he intoned, voice resonating unnaturally. Humanity stands accused of flagrant violation of non-interference protocols in 87 distinct incidents over the past solar month. How do you respond? Nix stood, straightening her shoulders. With evidence, High Counselor. She activated her datapad, projecting images across the chamber. The suffering colonists at Outpost Epsilon, the slave mines of Denib, the crushed native species on Lithios. These are not cases of human interference, she stated clearly. These are cases of human assistance to victims of exploitation and abuse. If the Council wishes to censure humanity for providing medical aid and sanctuary to the suffering, then we will wear that censure as a badge of honor. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Not all were hostile. The regulations exist for a reason, Ambassador, Vex'tul replied coldly. Each species must develop according to its own path. Intervention disrupts natural order. Natural order? Nyx repeated incredulously. There is nothing natural about engineered plagues or forced labor camps. These are deliberate actions taken by advanced species against those who cannot defend themselves. The Council has procedures for filing grievances, another counselor offered. Procedures that take decades, Nyx countered. How many more will suffer while we file paperwork? Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Commander Quinn and Professor Thorne had made a breakthrough. Working with Zeph'ra and a team of specialists, they had managed to translate a substantial portion of the ancient message. The results were troubling. It's a warning, all right, Thorne told Quinn as they reviewed the data. But not in the way we thought. The message, it turned out, was a historical account. The extinct galaxy, once home to hundreds of thriving civilizations, had been systematically conquered by a species called the Archons. The Archons had established a galactic order based on rigid hierarchy and exploitation, where stronger species were permitted and encouraged, even to use weaker ones as resources. The Archons sound familiar, Quinn muttered, thinking of the current Galactic Council. That's not the interesting part, Thorne continued. According to this account, the Archons had encountered humans before, or at least a species very similar to humans in another galaxy. And these human analogs had nearly toppled their entire system by simply refusing to accept the exploitation of weaker species. So what happened? Quinn asked. Thorne's expression grew grim. The Archons destroyed them. And then, according to this, they implemented a new protocol. Identify any emerging species with similar protective tendencies and eliminate them before they could become threats. And they saw us coming, Quinn realized. Their predictive technology identified Earth as a potential source of another protective species. Exactly. The message was sent as a warning to anyone who might discover it. Never stop the humans from protecting the weak, because the Archons will destroy any galaxy where that happens. Quinn felt a chill. And the Archon Collective and our current Galactic Council could be the descendants of the same species, Thorne finished, or at least followers of the same philosophy. Quinn immediately composed an urgent message to Ambassador Valerian, including all their findings. Back in the council chamber, Nyx's datapad chimed discreetly. She glanced down, quickly scanning Quinn's message, her expression hardening. High Counselor, she said, interrupting Vex'tul's lengthy monologue about cosmic order. I have a question about Galaxy XJ2397. Vex'tul paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. What about it? Matt. Is it true that your ancestors destroyed it because its inhabitants refused to accept the exploitation of weaker species? The chamber went silent. Vex'tul's pheromones shifted from intimidation to something sharper, more dangerous. You are treading on dangerous ground, Ambassador, he warned. I'll take that as a yes, Nyx replied evenly. And now you and your allies on this council are attempting to stop humanity from doing exactly what those extinct civilizations did, protecting the vulnerable from exploitation. Vex'tul's composure slipped, just for a moment. The Archon Collective maintains cosmic balance. Sometimes sacrifices must be made. An entire galaxy was not a sacrifice, Nyx shot back. It was genocide. The tension in the room was palpable. Representatives from smaller species looked between Nyx and Vex'tul, with dawning understanding. You have a choice, High Counselor, Nyx said quietly. Learn from history, or repeat it. The revelation of the Archon Collective's ancient crimes sent shockwaves through galactic society. Smaller species, long accustomed to accepting their place in the cosmic hierarchy, began questioning the foundations of that order. The Galactic Council split into factions, with the Archons and their allies increasingly isolated. Meanwhile, humanity continued doing what it did best, causing trouble by helping others. 6 months after the initial discovery of the message, Commander Eliza Quinn stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned research vessel Remembrance, but staring out at the remnants of Galaxy XJ-2397. "It's beautiful." In a haunting sort of way, she said to Professor Thorne, who was floating nearby in zero gravity. The professor had discovered that he thought best while drifting upside down, a habit he'd picked up from Zeph'ra. 2 million years of stellar decay will do that, Thorne replied. The cosmic equivalent of a memorial garden. The Remembrance had been dispatched to conduct a thorough investigation of the dead galaxy, searching for any remaining artifacts or messages from its extinct civilizations. They had already recovered several data caches, expanding their understanding of what had happened. "You know what I find most remarkable?" Quinn said. "They knew they were going to die. The Archons had already begun the process of stellar collapse. But instead of trying to save themselves, they spent their final resources sending warnings to potential future civilizations." "Not just warnings," Thorne corrected. "Encouragement. The complete translation makes that clear. They saw humanity's potential to break the cycle of exploitation, and they wanted to help ensure we would succeed where they had failed." Quinn nodded. They were afraid to stand up to the Archons, and it cost them everything. So they placed their hopes in a species that hadn't even evolved yet. On Earth, Ambassador Nix Valerian was addressing the newly formed Alliance of Protected Worlds. The alliance included not only humanity and its longtime allies, but also dozens of formerly overlooked species who had seized the opportunity to claim their independence from exploitative relationships. "The message from Galaxy XJ-2397 wasn't just a warning," she told the assembled representatives. "It was a challenge. A challenge to create a different kind of galactic community, one based not on power and exploitation, but on mutual support and protection." The Alliance had established the Guardian Protocol, a framework for identifying and addressing exploitation throughout known space. Unlike the Galactic Council's bureaucratic procedures, the protocol emphasized rapid response and direct intervention when necessary. "We honor the sacrifice of those who came before us," Nix continued, "by ensuring their fate is not repeated. No species should have to face extinction for daring to believe in a better way." Captain Miranda Hayes, recently promoted to Admiral following her actions at Outpost Epsilon, now commanded the Guardian fleet ships specifically designed to respond to humanitarian crises and protect vulnerable populations. The Hope's Horizon, her former ship, had become the symbol of the fleet, its image emblazoned on the Alliance insignia. "You know," she remarked to Commander Dax as they oversaw training exercises, "when I accidentally ignored those orders 6 months ago, I never imagined it would lead to this." "No?" Dax replied with a smile. "I did. You've never been good at ignoring people who need help." "I guess that's the human condition," Hayes said. "We're stubborn that way." The Archon Collective and their closest allies had withdrawn from mainstream galactic politics, retreating to their core systems. Rumors suggested they were building up military forces, but so far they had made no overt moves against the Alliance. "They're afraid," Zeph'ra had explained to Thorne during one of their research sessions. "The last time they faced a species like humans, they had to destroy an entire galaxy to maintain control. They know they cannot do the same to this galaxy without destroying themselves in the process." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when the Remembrance discovered an intact archive containing the complete history of Galaxy XJ-2397. Among its contents was a detailed account of the species that had inspired the warning message, a species remarkably similar to humans in their protective instincts and stubborn idealism. They called themselves the Guardians, Quinn told a rapt audience at the Alliance headquarters. They weren't physically imposing or technologically superior. Their strength came from their unwillingness to accept injustice, even when it didn't directly affect them. "Like humans," someone in the audience commented. "Like humans at their best," Quinn corrected. The Guardians ultimately failed because they stood alone. The message from Galaxy XJ2397 was sent in the hope that when humanity emerged, we would not make the same mistake. And humanity hadn't. Instead of standing alone, they had built alliances, shared technology, and created a network of mutual protection that spanned hundreds of worlds. The Archons destroyed a galaxy to preserve their system of exploitation, Nyx Valerian said in her closing remarks to the Alliance. But in doing so, they created the very thing they feared most, a warning that would eventually reach a species stubborn enough to heed it. She smiled as she looked out at the diverse assembly of species, many of whom would have been considered too weak to have a voice just a year earlier. The last message of a dead galaxy was never stop the humans from protecting the weak. They meant it as a warning to others about what we might do. Instead, we've taken it as a mission statement. And I think that's exactly what they were hoping for. As the Remembrance continued its exploration of the dead galaxy, the crew sometimes imagined they could feel the approval of those long-gone civilizations. Their final act had been to reach across time and space to warn a species they would never meet, hoping that humans would succeed where they had failed. And humanity, in its typical fashion, had responded by doing exactly what everyone feared they would do, standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, protecting the vulnerable, and generally causing trouble for anyone who thought might made right. Some things, it seemed, were constant across galaxies and across time. The strong would always try to exploit the weak, and humans, stubborn, emotional, unpredictable humans, would always be there to say, "Not on our watch." It wasn't just a human trait anymore. It was becoming a galactic one. And somewhere, in whatever afterlife might exist for extinct civilizations, the senders of that ancient message were surely smiling.